Donald Whalen was 34 years old, and until that Thursday afternoon in late November 2024, he thought he had the perfect marriage. He was a high school history teacher in Atlanta, making about $52,000 a year, and for the past 6 years he'd been married to Glenda, a woman he thought he knew better than anyone in the world. That day, Donald made a decision that would shatter everything he believed about love, loyalty, and the woman sleeping next to him every night. He decided to surprise his wife on her business trip to Miami. Glenda worked as a senior account manager for Meridian Pharmaceutical Marketing, a mid-sized firm that specialized in launching prescription drug campaigns. She'd been climbing the corporate ladder fast, traveling frequently for client meetings and conferences. Her salary had reached $95,000 annually with performance bonuses that sometimes added another $15,000. Donald had always been proud of her success, never once feeling threatened by the fact that she out-earned him nearly 2-to-1. He'd supported every late night at the office, every weekend workshop, every business trip that took her away from their modest 3-bedroom craftsman home in Decatur. Their marriage had seemed solid. They had date nights when Glenda was in town. They talked about having kids someday, maybe in another year or two when her career stabilized. They'd renovated the kitchen together last spring, spending weekends at Home Depot picking out tile and arguing playfully about cabinet hardware. Donald thought they were building something real, something lasting. This particular trip was supposed to be a 3-day pharmaceutical conference at the Ocean View Resort in South Beach. Glenda had left on Tuesday morning, kissing him goodbye at the door, her designer Toomey luggage, a gift from her company for hitting sales targets, rolling behind her as she headed to her white BMW 3 Series in the driveway. She seemed distracted that morning, checking her phone constantly, but Donald had attributed it to work stress. She was pitching a major campaign to a new client, she'd explained over coffee. The deal could mean a significant promotion to senior director, maybe even breaking into 6 figures. "This conference could change everything for us, babe," she'd said, adjusting her silk scarf. "David thinks I'm ready for the next level." David Price was Glenda's direct supervisor, a senior vice president who'd been with Meridian for 8 years. Donald had met him twice at company holiday parties, a tall, fit man in his early 40s who wore expensive Tom Ford suits and drove a leased Tesla Model S. He had an MBA from Wharton and a reputation for being brilliant but demanding. Glenda had always described him as a mentor figure who was helping her navigate corporate politics and position herself for advancement. Donald had planned to spend the weekend alone, grading essays on Reconstruction and the Civil Rights Movement while watching college basketball. It was a comfortable routine. Order Thai food, sprawl on the couch with his red pen, enjoy the quiet of an empty house. But Wednesday evening, everything changed. His mother called with unexpected news. His Aunt Helen, his father's sister who lived in Savannah, had sent him a check for $3,000 as a belated birthday gift. She was 78 and had been saving money in an envelope system for years, setting aside cash for each of her nieces and nephews. When she'd cleaned out her closet, she'd discovered she'd been saving for Donald's birthday for nearly a decade. "She wanted you to have something special," his mother explained. "Maybe take Glenda somewhere nice." Donald stared at the check, an idea forming. $3,000 wasn't life-changing money, but it was enough to do something spontaneous, something romantic. Glenda had been so stressed lately, working 12-hour days, bringing her laptop to bed. When was the last time they'd had a real adventure together? When was the last time he'd surprised her with something thoughtful? He spent an hour researching flights. There was a Delta flight leaving Thursday at 2:15 p.m. that would get him to Miami by 6:47 p.m. Round-trip ticket, $387, he booked it. Then he found a highly rated beachfront restaurant called Azure that Glenda had mentioned wanting to try after seeing it on Instagram. Reservation for 2 at 8:30 p.m. Confirmed. He even ordered flowers from a Miami florist for delivery to himself at the hotel. 2 dozen roses, Glenda's favorite. Donald told his principal he had a family emergency and needed Thursday afternoon off. He packed an overnight bag with a nice shirt, his good jeans, cologne. He imagined Glenda's face when he knocked on her hotel room door. The surprise, the delight, the spontaneous romance of it all. They'd have dinner on the beach, walk along the water, reconnect away from the demands of their busy lives. The flight was smooth. Donald used the 2.5-hour journey to grade some papers and think about his marriage. They'd met at a mutual friend's barbecue 7 years ago. Glenda had been working in entry-level pharmaceutical sales, driving all over Georgia to pitch doctors on cholesterol medications. Donald had just started his teaching career, still idealistic about shaping young minds. They'd bonded over both having demanding jobs that didn't pay enough and dreams of traveling to places they couldn't yet afford. Their first date had been miniature golf, followed by cheap Mexican food. Glenda had beaten him by 6 strokes and hadn't let him forget it for months. She was competitive, ambitious, driven, qualities Donald admired because they balanced his more laid-back approach to life. She pushed him to be better, to take risks, to not settle for comfortable mediocrity. They'd married after a year of dating in a small ceremony at a winery in North Georgia. 75 guests, a string quartet, vows they'd written themselves. Glenda had promised to choose him every day, to build a life of honesty and partnership. Donald had promised to support her dreams and be her constant in a changing world. For 5 years, those promises had seemed real. The plane landed at 6:47 p.m., right on schedule. Donald grabbed his overnight bag from the overhead bin and made his way through the Miami airport, his heart beating faster with excitement. The November evening was warm and humid, a welcome change from Atlanta's crisp autumn air. He caught an Uber, a Honda Accord driven by a chatty guy named Roberto, who spent the 20-minute drive talking about the best Cuban restaurants in Miami. The Ocean View Resort was everything the photos promised. Sleek modern glass architecture, towering palm trees swaying in the ocean breeze, a circular driveway where valets in crisp white uniforms rushed to assist guests arriving in Porsches and Range Rovers. The lobby was all marble and contemporary art, with a massive chandelier made of blown glass that looked like frozen water droplets. Donald approached the front desk, suddenly aware of how out of place he felt in his khakis and polo shirt among all the business executives in expensive suits. The young woman behind the counter, her name tag said Maria, smiled professionally. "Checking in, sir." "Actually, I'm here to surprise my wife," Donald explained. "Glenda Whalen. She's staying here for a conference. Room 847. Maria's fingers moved across her keyboard, her eyes on the screen. Donald watched her expression shift subtly, something like confusion, then discomfort. She looked up at him, and there was pity in her eyes. Donald's stomach tightened. "I see Mrs. Whalen checked in Tuesday," Maria said carefully. "But sir, I'm not able to give you a room key. Hotel policy requires—" "I'm her husband," Donald said, pulling out his driver's license and their wedding photo on his phone. "See? Same last name, same address." Maria glanced at the photo, then back at her computer screen. She bit her lip. "Mr. Whalen, the room is registered under your wife's company credit card, but there's another guest listed on the reservation." The lobby suddenly felt too warm. "Another guest?" Maria looked around, then leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "A Mr. David Price. He checked in yesterday afternoon." The name hit Donald like a physical blow. David, her boss, her mentor, the man who was supposedly helping advance her career. "I see," Donald said, his voice sounding hollow even to his own ears. "Thank you for your help." He walked away from the desk in a daze, his legs moving automatically toward the elevator bank. Other hotel guests brushed past him, couples laughing, businessmen on phones, a family with 2 small children. Normal people having normal evenings. Donald felt like he was watching them through glass, separate from their world. He pressed the button for the 8th floor. The elevator doors closed, and he saw his reflection in the polished brass, a man who suddenly looked older, more tired. The elevator rose smoothly, and Donald's mind raced. There had to be an explanation. Maybe David had booked a separate room, and the system was confused. Maybe they were working late, and David was just in her room discussing the presentation. Maybe the doors opened on the 8th floor. The hallway stretched out before him, silent and carpeted in deep burgundy. Abstract paintings lined the walls, geometric shapes that probably cost thousands of dollars. The hotel smelled like expensive air freshener and money. Room 843, 845, 847. Donald stood outside the door. The roses he'd retrieved from the concierge desk, feeling absurdly heavy in his hands. He raised his fist to knock, but stopped when he heard voices through the door. Glenda's voice, breathy and laughing. Then a man's deeper voice saying something Donald couldn't quite make out. Then came the sounds that would replay in his nightmares for weeks afterward. Laughter shifting into moans, the rhythmic creaking of furniture, heavy breathing, and Glenda's voice, her intimate voice, the one she used in their bedroom, saying things Donald had thought were meant only for him. God, yes. Right there. David. The words cut through him like broken glass. Donald felt his knees weaken, felt the world tilt sideways. The roses slipped from his hand, falling silently onto the plush carpet. His entire body went numb, yet somehow he was hyper-aware of every detail. The hum of the ice machine down the hall, the faint smell of cleaning products, the abstract painting across from room 847 that showed red slashes across a black canvas. His own heartbeat thundered in his ears, drowning out everything except those sounds from beyond the door. Sounds that meant his marriage was over. Sounds that meant everything he'd believed about his life was a lie. If you enjoy stories of shocking betrayals and sweet revenge, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new stories here every day, each one more intense than the last one we produce. And tell me where you are watching from and tell us what you like about your city country. Donald didn't know how long he stood there. Minutes maybe. Could have been 5. Could have been 10. Time felt distorted, elastic. Part of him wanted to pound on that door, to burst in and confront them, to make them face what they were doing. But a larger part of him, the part trained in historical strategy, in understanding how power shifts and conflicts resolve, told him to wait, to think, to plan. Confronting them now, in his current state of shock and rage, would accomplish nothing. Glenda would cry. David would apologize. They'd both make excuses. It would be his word against theirs, his hurt feelings against their careful justifications. They'd find a way to make him the bad guy, the jealous husband, the insecure man who couldn't handle his wife's success. No, Donald needed leverage. He needed evidence. He needed to understand the full scope of what was happening before he made any moves. He picked up the roses from the carpet, walked back to the elevator, and returned to the lobby. His hands were surprisingly steady as he approached Maria at the front desk again. "I need a room for tonight," he said. "Do you have anything available?" Maria looked relieved that he wasn't making a scene. "Of course, Mr. Whalen. We have a standard room available for $279 per night." Donald handed over his credit card. Money that would come from their joint checking account, he thought with bitter irony. He took the key card and went up to room 623, 6 floors away from his wife and her lover. The room was nice. King bed with crisp white sheets, a view of the ocean, a minibar he ignored despite desperately wanting a drink. Donald sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out his phone. His first instinct was to call Glenda, to scream at her, to demand answers. Instead, he opened his phone's camera and began documenting everything. He took photos of the hotel exterior, the lobby, the hallway on the 8th floor. He took a photo of his airline ticket showing his arrival time. He opened his note app and started writing down every detail he could remember. The sounds he'd heard, the conversation with Maria at the front desk, David's name on the room registration. Then Donald did something that felt both calculated and surreal. He composed a text message to Glenda. "Hey babe, hope the conference is going great. I've been thinking about you all day. Can't wait to hear all about the presentations when you get home. Miss you. Love you." He stared at the message for a long moment before hitting send. Let her think everything was normal. Let her believe she'd gotten away with it. Let her have no idea that her husband knew the truth. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Glenda was typing. "Miss you too. Conference is exhausting but good. Learning a lot. David's presentation went really well. Probably going to be another late night. Love you." Donald felt sick reading her casual lies. How many times had she done this? How many late nights and conference trips had been covers for sleeping with David? He set his phone down and stared at the ceiling, his mind working through the implications. They were both married. He'd met David's wife Patricia at a company party 2 years ago. She was a pediatric nurse, Korean-American like David, elegant and kind. She'd talked enthusiastically about their two kids, showing Donald photos of soccer games and piano recitals. Did she know? Was she sitting at home in their Buckhead house, trusting her husband just as Donald had trusted his wife? Donald spent the night in that hotel room, barely sleeping. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard those sounds from room 847. Every time he started to drift off, he'd jerk awake with his heart racing. He ordered room service at midnight, a burger he barely touched, and spent hours on. His phone researching. He looked up divorce laws in Georgia. He learned that while Georgia had moved away from fault-based divorce, adultery could still affect property division, alimony, and attorney's fees. He read articles about surviving infidelity, about the stages of grief, about how to protect yourself financially when a marriage ends. He also researched David Price. LinkedIn showed an impressive resume. Wharton MBA, 8 years at Meridian Pharmaceutical, a steady climb up the corporate ladder. David's profile picture showed him at some industry conference, looking confident and successful in an expensive suit. By 3 a.m., Donald had made some decisions. He wasn't going to confront Glenda in Miami. He wasn't going to give her any warning that he knew. He was going to fly back to Atlanta on Friday morning as planned, and he was going to spend the weekend gathering information, understanding the full scope of the betrayal, and planning his response. Because Donald understood something that Glenda and David didn't. In any conflict, the person with the best information and the most patience usually wins. Friday morning, Donald took an Uber back to the airport. He flew home to Atlanta, landing just after noon. He drove to their house in Decatur, the house they'd bought together, the house where they'd hosted dinner parties and Christmas mornings and lazy Sunday brunches. Now it felt like a crime scene, evidence of a life that had never been as real as he'd believed. Donald walked through the rooms, seeing everything differently. The framed photos on the walls, their wedding day, a vacation to Asheville, Glenda's promotion party, now felt like propaganda posters for a government that had already fallen. The kitchen where they'd cooked together, the bedroom where they'd made love, the home office where Glenda spent hours on work calls, all of it was tainted now, corrupted by betrayal. He went to Glenda's home office, a converted spare bedroom with built-in shelves and the expensive ergonomic chair. She kept everything meticulously organized, color-coded file folders, labeled binders, a large wall calendar marking her schedule. Donald photographed all of it. The calendar showed a pattern he hadn't noticed before. Multiple entries for conference, Miami, and client meeting, Chicago, and workshop, New Orleans, over the past 8 months. How many of those trips had actually been about work? How many had been cover stories for meeting David? In her desk drawer, under insurance documents and old tax returns, Donald found a note written on expensive cream-colored stationery. V, last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. I know we have to be careful, but God, I wish I could wake up next to you every morning. Same time next month? We can try that place you mentioned. D. The note was dated 4 months ago, July. They'd been doing this since at least July, probably longer. That meant Glenda had been lying to him for at least a third of their marriage. She'd been looking him in the eyes, sleeping in their bed, making love to him, planning their future, all while conducting a secret relationship with her boss. Donald photographed the note from multiple angles, careful to capture the handwriting, the date, every damning detail. Then he put it back exactly where he'd found it. Evidence. He was building a case, though he still wasn't entirely sure what his endgame was. He spent Friday afternoon going through old credit card statements on their joint account. He found charges at restaurants he'd never been to, florists delivering flowers he'd never received, hotels in cities where Glenda had supposedly been at conferences. The paper trail was extensive once he knew what to look for. Donald also discovered something else in Glenda's financial documents. She'd recently increased her life insurance policy through work from $100,000 to $500,000. The paperwork was dated 6 weeks ago. Donald was listed as the beneficiary. Was it just standard corporate benefits during open enrollment? Or was Glenda planning something? The thought sent chills down his spine, though he immediately dismissed it as paranoid. Glenda wasn't a murderer. She was just a cheater. By Friday evening, Donald was exhausted but resolved. He needed professional help. He pulled up his contacts and found James Morrison, his old college roommate, who now worked as a private investigator in Birmingham. They'd stayed close over the years, meeting up several times a year for drinks and Hawks games. Donald called him. James answered on the second ring, sounding cheerful. "Donald, what's up, man? You coming to Birmingham soon? We need to." "I need your professional help," Donald interrupted, "and I need this to stay completely confidential." James's tone changed immediately, becoming serious. "Of course. What's going on?" Donald explained everything: the surprise trip to Miami, what he'd heard outside room 847, the note he'd found, the pattern of suspicious trips. When he finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Jesus, Donald," James said quietly. "I'm so sorry. I don't even have words for how much that sucks." "I need information," Donald said. "I need to know if this is just an affair or if there's more to it. I need to know about David Price, his background, company policies, whether he's done this before, and I need documentation that would hold up legally if it came to that. Can you help me?" "Absolutely," James said without hesitation. "I'll start digging tomorrow. But Donald, are you sure you want to go down this road? Sometimes knowing more just makes the pain worse. Sometimes it's better to just file for divorce and move on with your life." "I can't move on until I understand what happened," Donald said. "I need to know the full truth, all of it." "Okay," James agreed. "Give me about a week. I'll be thorough. And Donald, I'm really sorry, brother. You didn't deserve this." After hanging up, Donald sat in the living room of his house and let himself feel the full weight of what had happened. His marriage was over. Whether or not he decided to pursue divorce immediately, whether or not he chose to expose Glenda and David publicly, the relationship he'd believed in was already dead. You can't unknow something once you know it. You can't unhear those sounds from outside room 847. Donald cried then, for the first time since Miami. He cried for the life he'd thought he had, for the future he'd imagined, for the trust that had been shattered beyond any possible repair. He cried until he had no tears left, until he was just empty and exhausted. Then he dried his eyes, ordered a pizza, and started planning what came next. Because Glenda and David had made a critical mistake. They'd underestimated him. They'd seen a mild-mannered history teacher who never made waves, never caused scenes, never fought back. They'd assumed he'd be easy to deceive, easy to manipulate, easy to discard when Glenda was ready to upgrade to a man with a bigger salary and a more impressive title. What they didn't understand was that Donald spent his days teaching young people about strategy, about how wars are won and lost, about how patient planning defeats impulsive reactions every single time. He taught units on the American Revolution, how the Continental Army won not through direct confrontation, but through strategic retreat and calculated strikes. He taught about the Civil Rights Movement, how lasting change came from careful organization and documented evidence, not just emotional outbursts. Donald Whalen was about to apply those lessons to his own life. Saturday morning, Glenda's flight landed at 3:15 p.m. Donald picked her up from the airport, pulling up to the arrivals curb at Hartsfield-Jackson just as she emerged with her rolling suitcase. She looked beautiful, her dark hair professionally styled, wearing a navy blazer and designer jeans, carrying the leather bag he'd given her for their anniversary last year. She also looked tired, with shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. "Hey, baby," Glenda called out, waving. She came over and kissed him, and Donald tasted betrayal on her lips. "God, it's good to be home. I missed you so much." "Missed you too," Donald said, taking her suitcase and loading it into the trunk of his Honda Civic. "How was the flight?" "Exhausting. Turbulence over the Gulf. And I sat next to a guy who wouldn't stop talking about cryptocurrency." She slid into the passenger seat and immediately checked her phone. "How was your week?" "Quiet," Donald said, pulling away from the curb. "Just work and grading papers. Nothing exciting." In the car, Glenda talked animatedly about the conference, the keynote speakers, the breakout sessions on digital marketing strategies, the networking dinner on the final night. She had details prepared, anecdotes ready. If Donald hadn't spent Thursday night in a Miami hotel room, hadn't heard what he'd heard, he would have believed every word. She was a skilled liar, he realized. Practiced, comfortable with deception. "Oh, and I have amazing news," Glenda said as they merged onto I-85 toward Decatur. "David told me on the flight back. He thinks I'm ready for that senior director position that's opening up in Q1. It would mean a bump to about $125,000 base, plus better bonuses and more stock options. We could finally think about moving to a bigger house, maybe something in Brookhaven or Virginia Highland. 4 bedrooms, a real backyard, maybe even start thinking about kids for real." "That's incredible," Donald said, keeping his voice neutral. "David's been really supportive of your career." "He really has," Glenda agreed, smiling. "He's been such a great mentor. He sees potential in me that I didn't even see in myself. I feel so lucky to have him as a boss." Donald's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Yeah, you're really lucky." They arrived home, and Donald helped carry Glenda's luggage inside. She immediately headed for the bedroom to unpack, while Donald went to the kitchen and opened the wine he'd bought, a Pinot Noir from Oregon, Glenda's favorite. He poured 2 glasses, his hands steady despite the storm raging inside him. That evening they had dinner together like a normal couple. They drank the wine Donald had bought. They sat on the couch and watched an episode of the cooking show Glenda liked. She fell asleep with her head on his shoulder, and Donald sat there for an hour, barely breathing, his arm around a woman who was now essentially a stranger to him. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel if you have not, because the ending of this story will blow your mind. And drop a comment below telling me what you think Donald should do next. Sunday, Glenda spent most of the day in her home office, catching up on emails and preparing for Monday's meetings. Donald went for a long run through their neighborhood, needing to think, needing to process everything. The November air was cool and crisp, and the physical exertion helped clear his head. By the time he returned home, sweaty and exhausted, he'd made several decisions about how to proceed. There was a text from James waiting for him. "Initial findings are very interesting. A lot more here than just a simple affair. Can we talk Monday evening? I'll have a preliminary report ready." Donald deleted the text immediately. He was being careful now about all his communications, all his actions, all his reactions. He couldn't afford to leave any evidence that Glenda might stumble across. He needed to maintain his cover as the trusting husband while he built his case in the background. That Sunday evening, as they prepared dinner together, grilled chicken and a salad, falling into their comfortable domestic routine, Donald watched Glenda carefully. She seemed relaxed, happy even. She hummed while she chopped vegetables. She told him about a funny meme one of her coworkers had sent. She made plans for them to see a movie next weekend. She felt no guilt, Donald realized, or if she did, she'd learned to compartmentalize it so completely that it didn't affect her day-to-day behavior. She could spend 3 days sleeping with her boss, then come home and seamlessly resume being a loving wife. The cognitive dissonance was stunning. They went to bed at 10:30 and Glenda curled up next to him like always. "I love you," she murmured sleepily. "I'm glad we have this. Some of my coworkers have such messy relationships, so much drama. I'm grateful we have something solid." "Me too," Donald whispered into the darkness, and wondered if Glenda could hear the hollow ring in his voice. He lay awake long after she'd fallen asleep, listening to her breathing, feeling the weight of her body against his side. This was his wife. They'd stood in front of 75 friends and family members and promised to be faithful, to cherish each other, to build a life together. Those vows had meant everything to Donald. He'd taken them seriously, lived by them, never even been tempted to break them. Apparently, they'd meant nothing to Glenda. Or maybe they had meant something once, and then something had changed. Maybe David had offered her something Donald couldn't. Wealth, power, status, excitement. Maybe the comfortable life Donald provided wasn't enough for a woman with big ambitions. Maybe he'd never been enough, and Glenda had just been waiting for someone better to come along. Donald didn't know. And lying there in the dark, listening to his wife's peaceful breathing, he wasn't sure which possibility hurt more. That Glenda had never really loved him, or that she had loved him once but had decided he wasn't worth staying faithful to. Either way, the marriage was over. The only question now was how it would end, and what consequences Glenda and David would face for destroying it. By Monday morning, Donald had his emotions firmly under control again. He woke up, made coffee, watched Glenda get ready for work like he'd done 1,000 times before. She was humming softly as she put on her makeup, already checking her phone every few minutes. Donald noticed she smiled at certain messages, typed quick responses, then set her phone face down on the bathroom counter. Probably texting David, Donald thought, planning their next rendezvous, making sure their stories aligned about the Miami conference. "Big day," he asked, keeping his tone light. "Just the usual chaos," Glenda replied, applying lipstick. "David wants to debrief about Miami, and we've got a major client presentation this afternoon. I'll probably be home late." "Sorry." "No problem," Donald said. "I've got a ton of essays to grade anyway." Glenda kissed him goodbye, a quick, distracted peck, grabbed her coffee thermos and leather bag, and headed out the door. Through the kitchen window, Donald watched her BMW pull out of the driveway and disappear down the tree-lined street. The moment she was gone, Donald pulled out his phone and opened a new note file. He titled it Evidence Log and began methodically documenting everything he knew so far. Every lie Glenda had told, every suspicious charge on their credit cards, every detail from Miami, every message and call that seemed suspicious in retrospect. He was building a case, and by the time he was done, Glenda and David would understand that betrayal doesn't happen in a vacuum. Actions have consequences, and those consequences can be far more devastating than they ever imagined. Monday at school felt surreal. Donald taught his first period American history class about the Reconstruction era, discussing how the South attempted to evade the consequences of losing the Civil War through black codes and Jim Crow laws. His students, a mix of juniors and seniors, debated whether true reconciliation was possible without accountability. "Mr. Whalen," a student named Jasmine asked, "do you think people can change if they never face consequences for what they did?" Donald thought about Glenda, about David, about all the lies and betrayals. "No," he said finally. "I think consequences are what force us to confront our actions and decide who we want to be. Without consequences, why would anyone change?" He had no idea how prophetic those words would become. At 4:30 p.m., Donald left Paideia and drove to a Starbucks in Midtown, far enough from both their neighborhood and Glenda's office in Buckhead that there was zero chance of accidentally running into her or anyone who knew them. James Morrison was already there, sitting in a corner booth with a laptop, a manila envelope, and 2 cups of coffee. "Got you a dark roast," James said as Donald slid into the booth. They shook hands, and Donald was grateful for the solid grip, the genuine sympathy in his friend's eyes. "How are you holding up?" "I'm functional," Donald said. "Tell me what you found." James opened his laptop. David Price, age 42, married for 15 years to Patricia Price, Eden Park. She's a pediatric nurse at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, works part-time so she can be home when the kids get out of school. They have 2 children, Emily, 13, and Joshua, 10. Both kids go to Westminster, which runs about $30,000 per kid per year in tuition. He pulled up a photo, a family portrait that must have been from social media. Patricia was elegant, smiling, standing beside David with their 2 kids in front of a Christmas tree. They looked like the perfect family. "David's been with Meridian Pharmaceutical Marketing for 8 years, James continued. Climbed from account manager to senior vice president. Current salary is around $180,000 base, plus performance bonuses that average another $40,000 to $60,000 annually, plus stock options. He drives a leased 2023 Tesla Model S for $200 a month. They live in a $650,000 house in Brookhaven, bought in 2019. Mortgage is about $4,500 a month. So he's successful," Donald said, "but not wealthy enough to be untouchable." "Exactly," James agreed. "Upper middle-class executive with a lifestyle he has to maintain. Which brings me to the interesting part." He pulled up another document. "This isn't David's first affair. I found evidence of at least 2 other women at Meridian who had relationships with him that ended with them leaving the company." Donald leaned forward. "Tell me more." "First was a woman named Christine Morrison. No relation to me," James clarified. "She was a marketing coordinator, worked directly under David about 5 years ago. She left suddenly in 2020, and her severance package included an NDA. I couldn't get her to talk officially, but I have a friend in HR circles who confirmed there was an incident involving inappropriate conduct." "And the second?" Donald asked. "Jennifer Brooks. She worked as a senior account manager, same position as Glenda, from 2021 to earlier this year. She was David's direct report and apparently being groomed for a director position. Then suddenly in May 2024, she withdrew from consideration for a promotion, transferred to Meridian's Boston office, and signed an NDA as part of her voluntary relocation package. James pulled up a LinkedIn profile showing an attractive black woman in her late 30s, professional photo, impressive credentials. I managed to contact her through a mutual connection. She wouldn't give me details on the record, but she confirmed there was an inappropriate relationship with David that made her position untenable. She implied that HR knew about it but offered her a choice: relocate and sign an NDA, or resign with a less generous severance package. Donald felt his jaw tighten. So the company knows David is a predator, but they protect him because he brings in revenue. That's exactly what's happening, James confirmed. David is one of Meridian's top rainmakers. He brought in 3 major pharmaceutical clients worth about $12 million in annual contracts. The company has decided it's cheaper to settle quietly with his victims than to fire him and lose those accounts. He pushed the manila envelope across the table. Everything I found is in here. Dates, documentation, witness statements from people willing to talk off the record, hotel receipts showing David and Glenda staying together at company expense. I found at least 7 trips over the past 8 months where they had adjoining rooms or shared rooms booked under Glenda's corporate card. Donald opened the envelope and began flipping through the contents. Printed emails between David and Glenda. Nothing explicitly sexual, but intimate in a way that no boss and subordinate should be. Looking forward to Miami. Last time was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you. Dinner tonight? Phone records showing hundreds of calls and texts between them, often late at night. A timeline showing Glenda's rapid promotions since she'd started working directly under David. Here's something else interesting, James said, pulling up another document. That senior director promotion Glenda mentioned? It was supposed to go to Jennifer Brooks. She had more experience, better performance reviews, and she'd been with the company longer. But David wanted Jennifer gone and Glenda elevated. So Jennifer was given her opportunity to relocate to Boston, and suddenly that position became available for Glenda. Jesus, Donald muttered. So Glenda's career advancement is directly tied to sleeping with her boss. It appears that way, yes, James said gently, which means if this comes out, Glenda's professional reputation is toast. Everyone will assume, correctly, that she earned her promotions on her back, not through merit. That's a career killer in most industries. Donald sat back, processing everything. This was so much bigger than he'd realized. This wasn't just a case of his wife having an affair. This was a pattern of sexual exploitation enabled by corporate complicity. David had done this before, and he'd do it again. Meridian Pharmaceutical had created an environment where powerful men could prey on ambitious women, then silence them with NDAs and hush money. What would you do? Donald asked. If you were me? James was quiet for a moment, considering. You've got a lot of options, and none of them are easy. Option 1 is the straightforward divorce. You've got ironclad proof of adultery, which in Georgia means you'd likely get a favorable settlement. You'd probably keep your full equity in the house, maybe get temporary spousal support given the income disparity, and Glenda would likely be on the hook for legal fees. You could be divorced in 6 months, maybe less if she doesn't contest it. That feels like she gets off easy, Donald said. Option 2, James continued, is to expose David to his wife and to the company. You blow up David's marriage, trigger an internal investigation at Meridian, possibly file a lawsuit. David loses his job, his marriage implodes, and Glenda's career takes a massive hit because everyone knows how she really got promoted. But Donald, that's nuclear. It's messy, public, and it'll hurt you too. You'll be that guy who aired his dirty laundry publicly. What's option 3? Donald asked. James smiled slightly. Option 3 is the strategic approach. You've got information that's valuable to multiple parties. Patricia Price deserves to know what kind of man she's married to. The company needs to understand their legal liability exposure. Jennifer Brooks and the other women David victimized might want justice if they knew they weren't alone. You could orchestrate a situation where the consequences for David and Glenda are comprehensive, but it requires patience, careful coordination, and perfect timing. Donald thought about his history lessons. The most successful military campaigns weren't won through brute force, but through superior intelligence, strategic positioning, and striking at the exact right moment when your opponent was most vulnerable. "I want option 3, he said. James nodded. "I thought you might." "Okay, here's what we need to do." They spent the next hour planning. James would continue gathering evidence and would discreetly reach out to Jennifer Brooks and the other women, letting them know they weren't alone and that there might be an opportunity to hold David and Meridian accountable without violating their NDAs. Courts often ruled that NDAs were void if the company violated them first by continuing the same behavior. Donald would consult with a divorce attorney to understand his legal options and begin preparing divorce papers. But they wouldn't file immediately. Instead, he'd continue playing the role of the oblivious husband while building their case. "There's one more thing you need to do," James said seriously. "Get yourself tested for STDs. I'm sorry to be blunt, but if Glenda's been sleeping with David for months while still sleeping with you..." Donald's stomach turned. He hadn't even thought about that. Another violation, another betrayal, the risk of disease exposure without his knowledge or consent. "Right, I'll do that today." "And Donald?" James's expression was sympathetic. "This is going to get ugly before it gets better. Once you pull the trigger on this, there's no going back. You need to be absolutely sure this is what you want." "I'm sure," Donald said. "David's been doing this for years and the company's been enabling him. How many other women are going to be victimized if someone doesn't stop him? How many other marriages is he going to destroy?" They shook hands again before parting ways. Donald tucked the manila envelope safely in his messenger bag and drove to an urgent care clinic on the way home. The testing process was quick but humiliating, sitting in a sterile room while a nurse asked him questions about sexual activity and potential exposure. He felt the shame of it, even though rationally he knew none of this was his fault. The nurse was professional and kind. "Results will be available in about a week," she said. "Try not to worry too much. Even if there is an exposure, most things are treatable these days." Donald thanked her and left, feeling hollowed out. This was what betrayal looked like. Not just emotional pain, but practical consequences. Medical tests, legal consultations, living in a state of constant vigilance and deception. Glenda came home at 8:45 p.m., later than she'd predicted but still within normal range. She looked tired but satisfied, carrying takeout from a Thai place they both liked. "Peace offering," she said, holding up the bag. "I know I've been working crazy hours lately. Thought we could have dinner together, just us." "That's sweet," Donald said, taking the bag and unpacking containers of pad thai and green curry. "How was your day?" "Intense," Glenda said, kicking off her heels and pouring herself a glass of wine. "David and I spent 2 hours with the new client, and I think we nailed it. They're ready to sign a contract worth about $2.3 million annually. If this goes through, my bonus alone will be close to $15,000. "That's amazing," Donald said, watching her face glow with excitement. "You've been working really hard for this." "I have," Glenda agreed. "David keeps telling me I have what it takes to make partner eventually. Not many women reach that level at Meridian. I could be one of the first." Donald thought about Jennifer Brooks, about Christine Morrison, about all the women whose careers had been derailed by David's manipulation. "David seems to take a lot of personal interest in your success." "He does," Glenda said, not picking up on any subtext. "He told me today that I remind him of himself when he was younger, hungry, ambitious, willing to do whatever it takes to win. He said I'm going places." "I bet he did," Donald murmured. They ate dinner together at their kitchen table, sitting in the chairs they'd picked out together at IKEA 3 years ago. Glenda talked about work, safe topics like marketing strategies and client preferences. Donald listened and asked appropriate questions, playing his role perfectly. Later, as they got ready for bed, Glenda's phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it and smiled before typing a quick response. "Everything okay?" Donald asked from the bathroom where he was brushing his teeth. "Just David with a question about tomorrow's presentation," Glenda called back. "He works too late. I keep telling him he needs better work-life balance." The irony was apparently lost on her. Tuesday, Donald had a free period in the afternoon, and used it to meet with Rachel Morrison, a divorce attorney his gym buddy had recommended. Her office was in a tasteful building in Buckhead, wood paneling, expensive art, leather furniture. Rachel herself was in her mid-50s, sharply dressed in a charcoal suit with gray hair styled in a professional bob. She listened to Donald's story without interruption, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. "You have an exceptionally strong case," she said when he finished. "The documentation your investigator friend gathered is excellent. In Georgia, adultery can significantly impact property division and alimony. Given the income disparity, she makes nearly double your salary, and her fault in the marriage breakdown, I'd estimate you could retain full equity in your share of the home, possibly receive temporary rehabilitative alimony for a year or two, and she'd likely be responsible for most of the legal fees." "What's the timeline?" Donald asked. "If she doesn't contest, which she might not given the evidence, we could have a settlement within 4 to 6 months. Georgia requires a 30-day waiting period after filing, and then it's just a matter of negotiating terms. If she fights it, we're looking at a year or more. But honestly, most cheating spouses want to settle quickly and quietly to avoid public embarrassment." Rachel leaned forward. "But I get the sense you want more than just a clean divorce. What else are you thinking?" Donald explained about David, about the pattern at Meridian Pharmaceutical, about the other women who'd been victimized in silence. "If I'm going to blow up my life anyway, shouldn't there be some larger justice? Shouldn't David face real consequences?" Rachel sat back, steepling her fingers thoughtfully. "Legally, you're on solid ground to share this information with David's wife. That's not slander or defamation if it's true, and you have evidence. As for the company, if you can prove they knowingly enabled sexual harassment and created a hostile work environment, there could be grounds for a lawsuit. Not from you directly, you're not an employee, but if the other victims come forward as a group, they could have a strong case." "But," Donald prompted, hearing the hesitation in her voice, "but that route is expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally draining," Rachel said honestly. "You'd be signing up for a much longer, more difficult process. Employment litigation can take years. It's also unpredictable. Juries are sympathetic to harassment victims, but corporations have deep pockets for legal defense." "What would you do?" Donald asked. Rachel smiled slightly. "I'd ask myself what I really want. Do you want revenge? To make them suffer the way you're suffering? Or do you want justice? To prevent this from happening to other people? Both are understandable motivations, but only one of them will leave you able to move forward with your life afterward." Donald considered that carefully. What if it could be both? Then you'd need a very carefully coordinated plan, excellent timing, and probably some luck, Rachel said. "But I've seen it done. The key is you have to be absolutely certain this is what you want, because once you pull that trigger, there's no taking it back. Lives will be destroyed, not just David's and Glenda's, but potentially yours too. You'll be in the middle of a very public scandal." "I'm certain," Donald said. They spent the next hour mapping out strategy. Rachel would prepare divorce papers, but hold them until Donald was ready to file. She'd also quietly reach out to the women who'd left Meridian, particularly Jennifer Brooks, to gauge their interest in breaking their NDAs if legal grounds existed. "There's one more thing," Rachel said as their meeting concluded. "You need to think carefully about your wife. I know she's hurt you terribly, but the situation is complex. David is her supervisor. There's an inherent power imbalance there. The company created an environment where this kind of relationship could develop. I'm not excusing her choices, but she's also potentially a victim of workplace sexual harassment, even if she doesn't see it that way." Donald nodded, though privately he wasn't sure he agreed. Yes, David had power over Glenda's career, but Glenda had made daily choices to lie to Donald, to maintain the affair, to plan to financially ruin him in a divorce. Those were active choices, not passive victimization. Still, Rachel's words stayed with him as he drove home. What did he really want? Did he want Glenda to suffer? Or did he want to feel like his pain had meant something, like some good could come from this destruction? Wednesday evening, Donald was grading papers in the living room when his phone buzzed with an email from James. The subject line read, "Urgent, you need to see this." The email contained screenshots of text messages between David and Glenda from earlier that day. James must have hacked into one of their phones or found a way to access their communications. Donald knew he probably shouldn't ask how James had obtained these messages, but he was grateful for them. David, Patricia asked about Miami. She's suspicious. Glenda, what did you tell her? David, conference stuff, meetings and dinners. She didn't buy it completely. We need to be more careful. Glenda, maybe we should cool things off for a while. This is getting complicated. David, we've been through this before. Just a few more months until your promotion is locked in and your salary increase kicks in. Then we can make decisions about leaving our spouses. I'm not losing you because we got impatient. Glenda, do you really think you'll leave Patricia? You've been saying that for months. David, I promise, V. By this time next year, we'll be together for real. No more hiding. We'll both file for divorce around the same time. Say we're moving on from dead marriages. No one will connect it to us being together. Glenda, I hope you mean that, because I can't keep lying to Donald forever. He's a good man. He doesn't deserve this. David, then end it. Tell him you want a divorce. You don't need to mention us. Glenda, I can't. Not yet. He'd ask too many questions, and you know Donald. He's analytical. He'd figure it out eventually. Besides, if I file now, we'd have to split everything 50-50, maybe worse. Better to wait until after the promotion, after I've moved some money around. Then I'll have more leverage. David, smart thinking. That's my girl. This is why you're going places. You think strategically. Glenda, I learned from the best. What time should I tell Donald I'll be home tonight? David, late. I booked us a room at the Intercontinental. Room 1247. I'll be there by 7. Bring that black dress I like. Glenda, you're terrible. I love it. David, I love you too. See you soon. Donald read the messages 3 times, each pass making him feel colder, more detached. Glenda wasn't just cheating, she was actively planning to financially devastate him. She was going to move money around, hide assets, wait until she had maximum leverage, and then divorce him on her terms, leaving him with as little as possible. And David was orchestrating the whole thing, encouraging Glenda to be strategic about destroying her marriage so he could maintain his affair without consequences. The cold fury Donald had been cultivating crystallized into diamond-hard resolve. This wasn't about a moment of weakness or a mistake anymore. This was calculated, premeditated betrayal. They were actively plotting against him, believing he was too naive and too trusting to ever figure it out. Donald forwarded the screenshots to Rachel Morrison with a simple message. Timeline needs to move up. How soon can we strike? Her response came within 20 minutes. I've been making calls. Jennifer Brooks is willing to talk. She's angry about being pushed out for Glenda. She has her own documentation and emails. I can probably get her to file an EEOC complaint by end of week, which would give us the opening we need. Can you be ready by Monday? Donald typed back, Monday works. Let's do this. He deleted the email thread, cleared his browser history, and went back to grading papers as if nothing had happened. An hour later, Glenda texted, working super late. Big project. Don't wait up. Love you. Donald knew exactly where she was. Room 1247 at the Intercontinental. Probably wearing that black dress David liked. Probably drinking champagne on the company's expense account while she planned Donald's financial destruction. He texted back, no problem. Love you too. Then he poured himself a bourbon, something he rarely did on weeknights, and sat on their back deck in the cool November evening. The house behind them had their Christmas lights up already, twinkling white lights strung along the roofline. Normal people living normal lives, probably dealing with normal problems like what to cook for Thanksgiving or whether to get their kids the new gaming console. Donald's problems were decidedly not normal. He thought about the past 6 years, their wedding at the vineyard in North Georgia, Glenda in a simple white dress, both of them so young and optimistic. The year they'd spent living in a tiny apartment in Virginia Highland, so broke they'd eaten ramen 3 nights a week, but so happy it hadn't mattered. The day they'd closed on this house, standing in the empty living room and dreaming about filling it with furniture and memories and eventually children. Had any of it been real? Or had Donald been living in a fantasy while Glenda played a role, waiting for something better to come along? He'd probably never know, and maybe it didn't matter. What mattered now was protecting himself, stopping David from victimizing anyone else, and making sure that actions had consequences. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you would have done in Donald's situation. Thursday and Friday passed in a blur of careful normalcy. Donald went to school, taught his classes, graded papers. He came home, made dinner, watched TV with Glenda when she wasn't working late. He played the role of the devoted husband perfectly, never letting his mask slip, never giving any indication that he knew the truth. Friday evening, Glenda suggested they go out for dinner, a rare treat during her busy season. They went to a nice Italian place in Decatur, sat across from each other in a cozy booth, and talked about their plans for Thanksgiving the following week. "My parents want us to come to Savannah," Glenda said, twirling pasta on her fork, "but I was thinking maybe we could do Thanksgiving here. Just the two of us. I feel like we've been so busy lately. It would be nice to have a quiet holiday together." "That sounds perfect," Donald said, thinking about how by Thanksgiving, their marriage would probably be in ashes, and they'd both be retaining lawyers. "Donald," Glenda said suddenly, reaching across the table to take his hand, "I know I've been distracted with work. I'm sorry about that. You've been so patient and supportive, and I don't tell you enough how much I appreciate it." Donald looked at her hand covering his, the same hand that wore the wedding ring he'd saved for 3 months to buy. "It's okay. I know how hard you work. Things will calm down after the holidays," Glenda promised, "and then we can really focus on us. Maybe plan that vacation we've been talking about. Somewhere tropical. Just you and me, reconnecting." "I'd like that," Donald lied, wondering if Glenda had planned to use that vacation to ask for a divorce, softening him up with a romantic getaway before delivering the blow. They finished dinner, and Glenda insisted on taking a selfie. "We never take pictures anymore." She posted it to Instagram with the caption, "Date night with my favorite person. I'm so lucky." Donald forced a smile for the camera, and later that night, he'd look at the photo and marvel at how convincing they both looked. Two people who appeared perfectly happy, perfectly in love, with no indication that everything was a carefully constructed lie. Saturday, Donald received a text from Rachel. "Jennifer Brooks is filing her EEOC complaint Monday morning. She's also willing to talk to a reporter I've connected with, Krista Price from the Atlanta Business Chronicle. Everything is in place. Are you ready?" Donald looked at Glenda, who was in the home office on a weekend work call that he could hear through the door, her intimate voice, her low laughter, David's name mentioned repeatedly. He thought about the hotel room in Miami, about the text messages planning his financial ruin, about 6 years of trust and love casually discarded for career advancement and excitement. He texted back, "I'm ready. Monday morning, 9 a.m. File everything." The dominoes were set. In just over 48 hours, David Price and Glenda Whalen would discover that underestimating someone is the most dangerous mistake you can make. And by the time the dust settled, they'd both learn a lesson about consequences that they'd never forget. Donald deleted the text, put his phone away, and went outside to the yard where Glenda was raking leaves. It was a beautiful, late November afternoon, mild temperature, clear blue sky, the kind of day that felt like a gift. "Need help?" he asked. Glenda smiled up at him, looking young and carefree in her old college sweatshirt and jeans. "Always. You want to bag while I rake?" They spent an hour working together in companionable silence, falling into the rhythm they'd developed over 6 years of shared life. The leaves made satisfying crunching sounds as they were scooped into bags. Their neighbor waved from across the fence. A dog barked somewhere down the street. Everything felt aggressively, mockingly normal. This time tomorrow, Donald thought, everything changes. He was ready. Monday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth for early December in Atlanta. Donald woke at 5:30 a.m., a full hour before his alarm, adrenaline already coursing through his system like electricity. This was the day. After 2.5 weeks of careful planning, evidence gathering, and strategic coordination, everything was finally in place. Glenda was still asleep beside him, her face peaceful and unguarded, dark hair spread across the pillow. Donald looked at her and felt nothing. Not anger, not love, not even sadness anymore. Just a cold, clear certainty that what he was about to do was necessary and just. He slipped out of bed quietly and went downstairs to make coffee. The house was still dark, silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of an early morning garbage truck. Donald stood at the kitchen window, watching the sky lighten from black to deep blue, and reviewed the timeline in his head one more time. At 6:47 a.m., his phone buzzed with the first message. Rachel Morrison. Jennifer Brooks is filing her EEOC complaint at 9 a.m. this morning. Her lawyer has also sent a formal notice to Meridian Pharmaceuticals' legal department, informing them that she considers her NDA void due to the company's continued pattern of harassment. We have our smoking gun. At 7:03 a.m., another text from James. Patricia Price responded to your email. She wants to meet today. I gave her your number. She sounds devastated but determined. At 7:15 a.m., Rachel again. Divorce papers are ready to file. I'll have them served to Glenda at her office at 10 a.m. Maximum professional embarrassment. I've also sent our complete evidence package to Meridian's board of directors, their general counsel, and their head of HR. They'll have it by 9 a.m. The package includes documentation of David's pattern of harassment, the hotel receipts, the text messages, everything. They'll have no choice but to act. At 7:22 a.m., James. Just confirmed, Krista Price from Atlanta Business Chronicle has everything. She's running a preliminary story online today at noon. Print edition with more detail Thursday. Donald took a deep breath and typed responses, confirming receipt to both Rachel and James. The machinery was in motion now. No. Turning back. He felt strangely calm, like a general who'd planned a battle for months and was now watching his strategy unfold exactly as designed. Glenda came downstairs at 7:30, already dressed for work in a sharp charcoal suit with a crimson blouse underneath. Her power outfit, she called it. She poured coffee and immediately checked her phone, frowning at something on the screen. Everything okay? Donald asked, keeping his voice casual. Weird email from Jennifer Brooks, Glenda said, scrolling. Something about filing a workplace complaint. David forwarded it to the whole leadership team, asking if anyone knows what she's talking about. Huh, Donald said neutrally. What kind of complaint? I don't know. Something about a hostile work environment? Glenda shook her head dismissively. Jennifer's always been a troublemaker. She couldn't handle the pressure of the senior account manager role, so she transferred to Boston, and now she's trying to blame everyone else for her failures. It's pathetic, honestly. Donald said nothing. In a few hours, Glenda would understand exactly why Jennifer Brooks was a troublemaker. Glenda kissed him goodbye, a quick distracted peck, and headed for the door. I might be late again tonight. David wants to do damage control on this Jennifer situation, and we've got that client meeting. Love you. Love you too, Donald said to her back as she left. The moment her car pulled out of the driveway, Donald executed phase 1 of his plan. He sent the first email from his anonymous account to Patricia Price. Mrs. Price, my name is Donald Whalen. Your husband David has been having an affair with his subordinate, my wife Glenda Whalen, for approximately 8 months. They have stayed together at hotels in Miami, New Orleans, Chicago, and Atlanta, all on company expense accounts. I discovered this when I surprised my wife on a business trip in November and heard them together in her hotel room. I have extensive documentation including hotel receipts, phone records, text messages, and evidence of David making false promises to my wife about leaving you. I'm sharing this because I believe you deserve to know the truth, and because my own marriage has been destroyed by this affair. I'm attaching complete evidence for your review. I'm deeply sorry to be the bearer of this news. The second email went to Meridian Pharmaceuticals CEO from Rachel Morrison's law office. Dear Mr. Brennan, I represent Donald Whalen, whose wife Glenda Whalen is employed at Meridian Pharmaceutical Marketing. I am writing to inform you of a documented pattern of sexual harassment and abuse of power within your organization, specifically involving Senior Vice President David Price. Mr. Price has engaged in multiple inappropriate relationships with female subordinates over the past 7 years, including Mrs. Whalen currently, and your company has repeatedly covered up these incidents through NDAs and forced departures. This has created a hostile work environment and exposed your company to significant legal liability. We are prepared to coordinate with other victims to file a comprehensive lawsuit unless this matter is addressed immediately and comprehensively. Please see attached documentation. The third email went to 3 journalists James had identified. I have documentation of systematic sexual harassment at Meridian Pharmaceutical Marketing spanning 7 years, including executive abuse of power, misuse of corporate funds for personal affairs, and company complicity in covering up multiple incidents through NDAs. If you're interested in investigating this story, please contact me. Then Donald went to school and taught his first period class about the civil rights movement. He discussed Rosa Parks, the Montgomery bus boycott, and how social change happens when individuals refuse to accept injustice quietly. His students engaged in a spirited debate about whether peaceful resistance or direct confrontation was more effective in achieving justice. The thing about strategic resistance, Donald told his class, is that it requires patience and planning. Rosa Parks didn't just spontaneously decide to stay in her seat. That action was planned by civil rights organizers who understood the power of the right action at the right time. Sometimes the most effective revolution is the one that looks calm on the surface, but is actually carefully orchestrated chaos underneath. His 17-year-old students had no idea their teacher was currently orchestrating his own small revolution. At 9:23 a.m. during his planning period, Donald's phone rang. Patricia Price. He stepped into the empty hallway to take the call. "This is Donald." "Mr. Whalen?" The woman's voice was tight with controlled emotion, each word carefully measured. "I received your email. I need to know this is real. I need to know you're not some sick person making this up to hurt my family." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Price, but it's real," Donald said gently. "I wouldn't contact you if I wasn't absolutely certain. I heard them together in a Miami hotel room. I have text messages where David promises to leave you, where he coaches my wife on how to hide assets before divorcing me. I understand this is devastating, but you deserve the truth." He heard Patricia take a shaky breath. "How long?" "Based on documentation I've gathered, at least 8 months, possibly longer." 8 months, she repeated, her voice breaking. "We've been married for 15 years. We have 2 children. Emily just turned 13 last month, and Joshua's 10. I trusted him. I believed him every time he said he was traveling for work. I never questioned." Her voice cracked completely. Donald's heart ached for her. Patricia was an innocent victim in all this, just like him. "I know. I trusted my wife too. I'm not doing this for revenge, Mrs. Price. I'm doing it because the truth matters and because your husband and my wife need to face consequences for what they've done." "What happens now?" Patricia asked, regaining some composure. "That's entirely up to you," Donald said. "But if you're willing, I'd like to coordinate our responses. We can support each other through this." There's also a pattern here. David has done this before to other women at the company. The company has been covering it up. If we work together, we can make sure he's held accountable and that he can't do this to anyone else. There was a long pause. Donald could hear Patricia breathing, could imagine her sitting somewhere processing the fact that her entire marriage was a lie. "Yes," she said finally, her voice hardening. "Let's do that. David's going to pay for this. They're both going to pay for what they've done to us." Donald returned to his classroom just as his phone began exploding with activity. Text messages from James, from Rachel, from numbers he didn't recognize. He silenced the phone and taught his second period class on the fall of the Roman Empire, discussing how internal corruption and moral decay often destroyed empires more effectively than any external enemy ever could. At 10:15 a.m., during his next planning period, Donald finally checked his messages. Rachel had sent a photo. The process server had successfully delivered divorce papers to Glenda at Meridian Pharmaceuticals' office. The timestamp showed 10:04 a.m. James had sent multiple updates. Meridian's board went into emergency session at 9:30. David Price has been placed on immediate administrative leave pending investigation. Patricia Price just filed for divorce. Her lawyer is going for full custody and maximum assets. She's also threatening to expose David's affairs publicly if he fights her. Krista Price's preliminary article just went live online. Check Atlanta Business Chronicle's website. Donald pulled up the article on his phone. Pharmaceutical marketing firm faces sexual harassment allegations. The story, named David Price, detailed his position and salary and included anonymous accounts from former employees describing a pattern of inappropriate relationships with subordinates that the company had allegedly covered up. Jennifer Brooks was quoted by name. "I was forced to choose between my career and my integrity. The company made it clear that if I wanted to advance, I needed to accept that certain executives operated by different rules." At 11:02 a.m., Glenda called. Donald let it ring. She called again immediately, and again, 7 times in 15 minutes. He listened to the voicemails during lunch. First message: "Donald, what the hell is going on? I just got divorce papers delivered to my office, in front of everyone. The receptionist handed them to me while I was in a meeting with a client. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? Call me back right now." Second message: "Donald, seriously, we need to talk about this. I don't understand what's happening. If you're upset about something, we should discuss it like adults, not through lawyers and public humiliation. Please call me." Third message: "Okay, I'm starting to get really worried. Is this some kind of joke? Did someone hack your email and send those divorce papers as a prank? Please just call me and tell me what's going on." Fourth message, and Donald could hear the panic creeping into her voice: "David's been suspended. They're investigating him for something. HR pulled him into a meeting, and now he's not answering his phone. Donald, did you do something? Did you? Oh God, please call me." Fifth message, now fully afraid: I know you know. I don't know how you found out, but please, please call me. We need to talk about this. I can explain everything. It's not what you think. Donald, please." Sixth message: "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Whatever you think happened, I can explain. It was a mistake. It doesn't mean anything. Please don't throw away 6 years of marriage over this. We can work through it. We can go to counseling. Please just talk to me." Seventh message, and now she was crying: "Donald, I'm begging you. Don't do this. Don't destroy everything we built together. I love you. I made a mistake, but I love you. Please give me a chance to make this right. Please." Donald saved all the messages. More evidence. Then he called her back. She answered on the first ring. "Donald, I know about David," he said calmly, cutting off whatever excuse she'd prepared. "I know about Miami. I know about all of it." Silence. Then in a small voice: "How?" "I was there, Glenda. In Miami. I decided to surprise you on your business trip. I heard you with him through the hotel room door. Room 847, remember?" He could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, rapid and panicked. "Donald, it's more complicated than—" "No," Donald interrupted. "It's actually very simple. You cheated on me with your boss for at least 8 months. You lied to me every single day. You made me feel crazy for noticing you were distant. And you were planning to hide assets and blindside me with a divorce once you got your promotion. I read your text messages with David." "You went through my phone?" Glenda's voice shifted from panic to defensive anger, a classic tactic Donald recognized from his teaching experience. When students were caught cheating, they often tried to make it about the method of discovery rather than the cheating itself. "I hired a private investigator," Donald said. "Everything I know is documented and legal. The divorce papers you were served are just the beginning, Glenda. David's company is investigating him for a pattern of sexual harassment. His wife knows everything and is filing for divorce. And I've provided information to journalists about Meridian's toxic culture of protecting powerful men while silencing their victims." "You bastard," Glenda hissed. "You're trying to destroy my career. Everything I've worked for." "I'm trying to hold you accountable," Donald corrected, his voice still eerily calm. "You and David made choices. You chose to lie, to cheat, to plot against me. Those choices have consequences. You don't get to betray someone who loved you and trusted you and then walk away without facing any repercussions." "Donald, please." Glenda's voice broke. "We can work this out. We can go to counseling. It was a mistake. I'm sorry. I'll end things with David immediately. We can save our marriage. I promise I'll—" "No," Donald said. "We can't. Because I don't love you anymore, Glenda. I don't even know who you are. The woman I married wouldn't have done this. You're a stranger to me now. So that's it, Glenda said, anger returning. After 6 years of marriage, you're just throwing it away? You won't even try? I'm not the one who threw it away, Donald said quietly. You did that the first time you slept with David. You did that every time you looked me in the eyes and lied. You did that when you decided your career ambitions were more important than our marriage vows. This isn't me giving up, Glenda. This is me acknowledging what you already destroyed. He hung up before she could respond. At 2 p.m., Donald met with Rachel Morrison and journalist Krista Price at a coffee shop in Virginia Highland. Krista was an Asian-American woman in her early 40s, with intelligent eyes and a reputation for thorough investigative work. She'd been covering workplace harassment stories for years. This is quite a story, Krista said, reviewing the documents Donald and Rachel had provided. Serial sexual harassment by a high-level executive, corporate cover-ups spanning years, multiple victims silenced through NDAs, misuse of company funds for personal affairs. And you have multiple women willing to go on the record? Jennifer Brooks has filed with the EEOC and is willing to be quoted by name, Rachel confirmed. I'm in contact with 2 other former Meridian employees who are reconsidering their NDAs. Christine Morrison is particularly interested. She was the first victim we know about, and she's been carrying guilt about not speaking up for 5 years. If this story goes public with Jennifer's complaint, I expect more women will come forward. Krista turned to Donald. I need to understand your motivations here. Are you doing this to hurt your wife and her boss, or do you genuinely believe there's a larger problem that needs to be addressed? Donald met her eyes steadily. Both. I won't pretend I'm not angry about what they did to me, but David Price has been victimizing women for years, and Meridian Pharmaceutical has enabled him because he's profitable. If I don't speak up now, how many more women will he hurt? How many more marriages will he destroy? Yes, I want him and Glenda to face consequences, but I also want this pattern to stop. Fair answer, Krista said. Can I quote you on that? Yes, Donald said. Use my name. I'm not hiding. They talked for 90 minutes. Krista asked detailed questions about the timeline, the evidence, the company's response. She was professional and thorough, and Donald could tell she saw the significance of the story. This wasn't just one affair. It was a systemic problem about power, corporate culture, and accountability. When the meeting ended, Krista shook both their hands. I need a few days to verify everything and reach out to Meridian for official comment. But assuming your evidence checks out, and it looks very solid, I'll have a comprehensive story ready for Thursday's print edition, with updates as this develops. Donald left the meeting feeling both exhilarated and exhausted. He'd set everything in motion. Now he just had to wait and watch how it all unfolded. The rest of Monday was a blur of calls, texts, and updates. Patricia Price called to say she'd consulted with a divorce attorney and was proceeding aggressively. She wanted full custody, the house, and maximum child support in alimony. Her lawyer had sent David a formal letter outlining her demands and making clear that if he fought her, she'd ensure everyone in their social circle knew exactly why their marriage was ending. James sent photos from the Meridian Pharmaceutical office. Apparently, David had been escorted out by security after his meeting with HR. Employees were buzzing with rumors. The company had sent an internal memo about taking workplace concerns seriously and announced an independent investigation. Glenda sent 14 text messages that Donald didn't answer. We need to talk. Please don't do this. I made a mistake, but we can fix this. How can you be so cruel? David says you're trying to ruin his life. Everyone at work knows now. I'm humiliated. My career is over because of you. I hope you're happy destroying everything. I never meant to hurt you. Please, can we just talk face to face? I'm coming home. We need to talk. Donald, please. I love you. Doesn't that mean anything? Fine. I guess 6 years meant nothing to you. Donald read them all and responded with just one message. Have your lawyer contact mine. Don't come to the house. Tuesday morning, Donald woke to an email from David Price. The subject line, we need to talk, man to man. The email was long, rambling, and desperate. Donald, I don't know what Glenda has told you or what you think happened, but you're making a huge mistake. Yes, Glenda and I have become close. She's an exceptional employee, and I've mentored her. But anything beyond that has been completely mutual and consensual. I never abused my position or made her uncomfortable. She pursued me as much as I pursued her. You need to understand, marriages fail all the time. Sometimes people grow apart. That's not anyone's fault. What you're doing now, destroying my career, contacting my wife, talking to reporters, that's vindictive and unnecessary. You're hurting innocent people. My children don't deserve to have their father's reputation destroyed. Patricia doesn't deserve this humiliation. And Glenda, she's going to lose everything she's worked for because you can't accept that your marriage was already over. I'm asking you, man to man, to call this off. Let's handle this privately, like adults. I'm willing to stay away from Glenda if that's what you want. I'll recommend her for a transfer to another department. We can all move on with our lives without destroying each other. Please think about what you're doing. Donald read the email twice, his disgust growing with each pass. David was trying to reframe the narrative, positioning himself and Glenda as victims of a vindictive husband rather than perpetrators of betrayal. He was minimizing his abuse of power, deflecting responsibility, and trying to manipulate Donald into backing down. Donald deleted the email without responding. Wednesday, the second article appeared online. More women come forward in Meridian pharmaceutical harassment scandal. Krista Price had moved fast. The article now included statements from 3 women total: Jennifer Brooks, Christine Morrison, and a third woman Donald hadn't known about who'd worked under David in 2019. All 3 described similar patterns: initial mentorship that became inappropriately intimate, promises of career advancement, pressure to keep relationships secret, and then either forced departures or lateral transfers when they tried to end things. The article also included a statement from Meridian Pharmaceuticals' CEO. We take these allegations extremely seriously and have launched a comprehensive internal investigation. Mr. Price has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome. We are committed to maintaining a safe and respectful workplace for all employees. By Wednesday afternoon, Meridian's stock had dropped 4%. Industry blogs were picking up the story. Pharmaceutical companies that contracted with Meridian were reportedly reconsidering their relationships. The scandal was growing beyond just David and Glenda. It was becoming a referendum on toxic workplace culture in the pharmaceutical industry. Make sure you like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought of Donald's revenge. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thursday morning brought the comprehensive print article in the Atlanta Business Chronicle, Pharmaceutical Marketing Firms' Culture of Harassment Exposed. It was front-page news in the business section. Krista Price had done her homework. She'd interviewed 8 former employees, obtained internal company documents showing HR had received multiple complaints about David over the years, and documented how the company had systematically protected him through NDAs and quiet settlements. The article included a photo of David from a company event, looking confident and successful. It also included Donald's quote, "My wife's affair with her supervisor destroyed my marriage. But what I discovered in investigating was bigger than just my personal pain. This was a pattern of exploitation that the company enabled. I couldn't stay silent knowing this would continue if no one spoke up." By Thursday evening, Meridian Pharmaceutical had announced David Price's termination for violations of company policy and professional standards. Their stock had stabilized after the announcement. The legal team was reportedly in crisis mode, trying to get ahead of potential lawsuits. Patricia Price had filed her divorce papers, which were now public record. Atlanta's social media was buzzing. Apparently, David and Patricia moved in wealthy circles, and the scandal was the talk of private schools and country clubs across Buckhead. And Glenda had been called into a marathon HR meeting Thursday morning. She wasn't fired, but the promotion to senior director was officially rescinded. She was being reassigned from David's team to a different department, effectively demoted. Her career trajectory at Meridian was over. Everyone in the company knew how she'd gotten her promotions, and no amount of actual talent could overcome that reputation now. Friday afternoon, 2 weeks after Donald had stood outside that Miami hotel room listening to his marriage die, Rachel Morrison called with news about the divorce settlement. "Glenda's lawyer called this morning," Rachel said. "They want to settle quickly and quietly. They're offering you full equity in the marital home, essentially buying out your share so you can walk away with about $85,000 cash. They're also offering 18 months of alimony at $2,000 per month, which is actually quite generous given Georgia law. And they'll cover all legal fees for both sides. She wants this over with minimal publicity. What's the catch? Donald asked. She wants you to sign an NDA about the affair and the circumstances of the divorce. She doesn't want you talking to any more reporters or giving interviews. Donald thought about that. No, I'm not signing an NDA. Everything I know is already in the public record or has been reported. I'm not going to be silenced the way David's other victims were. I told them you'd say that, Rachel said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. So they've revised the offer, same financial terms, but no NDA. They just want this done. And my counteroffer? Donald had discussed this with Rachel earlier in the week. I proposed you keep the house entirely. She moves out and signs over her share. You get 2 years of rehabilitative alimony at $2,500 per month. She covers all legal fees and any tax implications. And there's a clause that if she violates any terms or badmouths you publicly, she forfeits any remaining shared assets. And they accepted. She's desperate to move on, Donald. Her reputation at work is destroyed. David won't even return her calls. Apparently, he's blaming her for everything with his wife and his employers. Glenda's realizing she gave up her marriage for a man who's now pretending she doesn't exist. Good, Donald said, then surprising himself. No, that's not good. That's sad. It's what she deserves, but it's still sad. That's a healthy perspective, Rachel said gently. You're going to be okay, Donald. This has been brutal, but you're handling it with more grace than most people would. They finalized the settlement terms. Glenda would move out by the end of the month. The divorce would be final by late January. Donald would keep the house, get enough money to stabilize financially, and would be free to start his life over. 2 weeks later, on a cold Saturday morning, 2 days before Christmas, Donald sat in his living room, surrounded by half-packed boxes. Glenda was taking her things, furniture she'd brought into the marriage, her clothes, her books, the artwork she'd collected. The house was starting to look bare, but Donald didn't mind. Each empty space felt like freedom. Glenda had asked to talk to him one last time before she left for good. She'd been staying with a friend since the settlement, but now she was moving to Boston, accepting a position at Meridian's East Coast office, starting over where no one knew her story. She arrived at 10 a.m., looking thinner than Donald remembered, with dark circles under her eyes. She'd cut her hair short, a dramatic change from the long waves she'd always worn. She looked older, tired, diminished. Thank you for letting me come by, she said quietly, standing awkwardly in what used to be their shared living room. The settlement says you can get your things, Donald said. I'm not going to make it difficult. That's not why I'm here. Glenda wrapped her arms around herself. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. Not sorry I got caught. Sorry for what I did. For the lying, the cheating, the planning to screw you financially. All of it. Donald said nothing, waiting. I've been seeing a therapist, Glenda continued, trying to figure out when I became the kind of person who could do what I did. And I still don't have a perfect answer. It started small. David paying attention to me, making me feel important and valued. Then it escalated so gradually that I didn't even realize how far I'd gone until it was too late to stop without destroying everything. You had a choice at every step, Donald said. I know. I made terrible choices. I convinced myself it was somehow okay because our marriage had become routine, because David made me feel special, because I deserved career success and happiness. I created a narrative where I was the protagonist of my own story, and you were just collateral damage. That was wrong. It was cruel. I was cruel. Glenda's eyes filled with tears. The worst part is, you were right about David. He dropped me the second things got complicated. All his promises about leaving Patricia, about us being together, they were lies. He told his lawyers I seduced him, that I was obsessed and wouldn't leave him alone. He's throwing me under the bus completely to save his own reputation with his wife. I'm sorry, Donald said, and meant it. That's another betrayal on top of everything else. I don't deserve your sympathy, Glenda said, but I wanted you to know that I understand what I destroyed now. Our marriage was real. It was good. And I threw it away for a fantasy, for ego validation, for ambition. I'll regret that for the rest of my life." They stood in silence for a moment. "I forgive you," Donald said finally. "Not because you deserve it, but because I don't want to carry anger around anymore. But Glenda, we're not getting back together. That chapter of our lives is over. We both need to accept that and move forward." "I know," she said quietly. I wanted you to understand that I'm sorry, and that I hope someday you can look back on the good years, because there were good years, without it all being poisoned by how it ended." "Maybe someday," Donald said. "Right now it's still too raw." Glenda nodded. She looked around the living room one more time, at the walls where their pictures used to hang, at the couch where they'd watched countless movies, at the window that looked out on the yard where they'd raked leaves together just a month ago. "Goodbye, Donald. I really do hope you find happiness." "You too," Donald said. "I hope Boston is a fresh start for you." She left, and Donald watched through the window as she loaded boxes into her car and drove away. He felt lighter, as if some weight he'd been carrying had finally been lifted. Over the next months, Donald rebuilt his life piece by piece. He kept the house but made it his own, painted the bedroom a color he liked, bought new furniture, turned Glenda's office into a reading room. He started dating again, cautiously at first, but gradually opened himself up to the possibility of connection. He joined a gym and lost 20 pounds. He took up painting, discovering he had a natural talent for landscapes. David Price's life unraveled completely. His divorce from Patricia was brutal in public. She got the house, primary custody, and a settlement that left David financially devastated. He lost his job at Meridian and found himself essentially blacklisted in the pharmaceutical industry. No one wanted to hire an executive who came with that kind of scandal baggage. Last Donald heard, David was working as a consultant, making a fraction of his previous salary, living in a modest apartment, and seeing his children every other weekend under supervised conditions. Meridian Pharmaceuticals settled the class action lawsuit brought by Jennifer Brooks and 5 other women for $4.2 million total. The company also implemented a complete overhaul of their HR policies, hired an independent firm to audit their workplace culture, and appointed their first female senior vice president. The scandal had been expensive, but it had forced real change. Glenda stayed in Boston. According to mutual friends, she was rebuilding her career slowly, working harder than ever to prove her promotions were earned by merit now. She was in therapy, single, focused on becoming someone she could respect. Donald wished her well from a distance. And Donald learned something profound through the pain of betrayal. He learned that you can survive having your heart broken and your trust shattered. He learned that revenge isn't about making others suffer, but about holding them accountable while maintaining your own integrity. He learned that the best response to betrayal isn't rage or cruelty, but strategic action that protects yourself and others. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Donald was sitting on his back deck on a warm spring evening, grading papers and drinking wine, when his phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Mr. Whalen, this is Jennifer Brooks. I wanted to thank you. Because you spoke up, I found my voice again. Because you held David accountable, I was able to get justice. I hope you're doing well. You're a good man." Donald smiled and typed back, "Thank you. I hope you're doing well too. We all deserve better than what happened." He set his phone down and looked out at his backyard. The azaleas were blooming, painting the garden in shades of pink and purple. The evening air was mild, carrying the scent of honeysuckle. A cardinal sang from the oak tree at the property line. Donald had lost his marriage, had his trust violated, and had his life turned upside down. But he'd gained something too: self-respect, integrity, and the knowledge that he'd stood up for what was right even when it was hard. He'd protected future victims. He'd held powerful people accountable. He'd refused to be silenced or diminished. In the months that followed, Donald often thought about that November evening in Miami when he'd stood outside room 847, frozen in shock and pain, listening to his marriage die through a hotel room door. That moment had been a crossroads. He could have burst through that door and made a scene. He could have reacted with pure emotion and rage. He could have handled everything impulsively and self-destructively. Instead, he'd chosen strategy over emotion. He'd chosen accountability over revenge. He'd chosen to think about future victims rather than just his own pain. And in doing so, he'd not only reclaimed his own life, but had helped protect other women from experiencing what he and Patricia Price had endured. The lesson wasn't that betrayal doesn't hurt. It does, profoundly and completely. The lesson was that how you respond to betrayal defines who you are. You can let it destroy you, or you can let it refine you into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. Donald had chosen refinement. He'd learned that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's holding people accountable for their actions while maintaining your own integrity and compassion. It's making sure that something good can come from your pain. It's refusing to let betrayal turn you into a worse person. Sometimes justice and personal healing can coexist. Sometimes doing the right thing for others helps you heal yourself. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do in response to betrayal is to make sure it means something beyond your own suffering. Donald Whalen had learned all of that the hard way, but he'd learned it well. And as he sat on his deck that spring evening, single but not broken, hurt but not destroyed, he understood that he'd come through the fire and emerged stronger on the other side. That was the real victory, not that David and Glenda had suffered consequences, but that Donald had survived their betrayal and become someone he could be proud of in the process. If you enjoyed this story, like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.